Hi everybody, it's Alex Newton from K-lytics, today with our self-publishing presentation about how to spot winning trends, categories and market niches. It's evening time in Switzerland from where I'm talking to right now, and I send you my greetings to wherever you are on the planet watching this presentation. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm the founder of K-lytics.com. We provide market research information to authors and publishers to help them make better and faster publishing decisions. We've worked with many leading individuals and organizations in the self-publishing industry, and it has always been my mission to bring the numbers and the arts together. This may not be intuitive for an artist, for a writer, but if you are an indie author, you are in a business, and if you're in a business, you should look at the numbers that concern your business, your market, and your readers. The challenge for me is that whenever I mention big data or numbers to an audience, the common reaction is usually this, but don't worry, I'll try to make this fun, and I'm confident you will walk out of this session with a whole number of actionable insights. There are many sources of insights in your author business. Insights from working alone. It is, you know, that when you do a certain promotion on your book number 3 and you know it worked, you can reinforce what worked based on the data you have. You can share those experiences by working with your author friends. Many of you are members of Facebook groups, you name it. And where we come in is to complement those efforts by working with the experience of thousands and thousands of books that we've been monitoring over the last 6 years. And whenever we find certain patterns in the book data, we'll try to come to conclusions and present it to you in a very easy manner. So if we find a pattern that looks like Pac-Man, we try to convey the message in a very simple format. And with that, I probably destroyed pie charts for you for the rest of your life. Okay, let's dive into the first chapter of our today's journey, spotting trends. The first thing to note is that there are trends. I call them market forces. For example, in genres, take the graph on the left-hand side. The red line is the Google search volume for the very term paranormal romance over a 10-year horizon. You see it's been trending down from a peak in 2012. On the right-hand side, during the same period, a sub-market of it, shifter romance, has been trending upwards. What we're talking about here is how to catch the wave as a writer. And many a writer tells me, Alex, but why should I worry about catching these waves? It takes me too long to write a book, so I cannot jump onto a certain trend. The good news about book market waves is that we're not in the fashion industry. Look at this timeline graph from the year 2006 all the way to 2020. The yellow line is the search interest on Google for vampire romance, followed by the next wave, paranormal romance. And as you can see, that's been a build-up here over a whole number of years. Then followed by reverse harem romance, a trend that hasn't been a phenomenon just for the last 2 or 3 years. In fact, there has been a build-up driven by a trope and interest in Japanese and Korean manga comics and anime movies that has been there for a whole number of years already before it's even hit the book market. How can you spot these trends? Well, one of the big drivers is obviously the big screen, movie theaters, the cinema, and these can in turn, turn into TV series or a streaming series on Netflix, and books can benefit from these. My favorite example is vampire romance. Well, take the Twilight blockbuster movie. It goes all the way back to 2008. Then followed by The Vampire Diaries, and you see that the author Bella Forrest, a very famous author in the space, seems to have jumped onto the bandwagon when it's already gone. And her novel here, as expressed in the search interest on Google for A Shade of Vampire, comes in here, what's this year, 2013, 2014. That's where it really picked up already when the overall trend seemed to have gone. Well, she capitalized on this whole vampire romance trend for years. I think A Shade of Vampire has like more than 90 books in the series, and only recently she started the new series. Okay, this is wizards, not vampires, Harley Merlin, but you get the idea. Therefore, lesson number 1 in trend spotting: vampires never die. All right, what about billionaires then? Are they immortal or not? We see a similar phenomenon. Well, how 50 Shades of Grey sparked interest. The blue line is the search interest on Google for first the book, 50 Shades of Grey, then the big blockbuster movie, the first one of the series 50 Shades of Grey. The red line is the search interest for the exact search phrase billionaire romance on Google. Again, you can see how much inertia there is in the book market, where the search interest goes up here for billionaire romance, and then you see, well, it's not dying down, it's slowly fading down. And no wonder on Amazon you find these thousands and thousands of books here, more than 50,000 search results for the search term billionaire romance, right? So let's add something else in, and that is bringing supply into the whole equation. The red line is the curve we just saw, Google search interest. Now the blue bars is the number of Kindle Unlimited and non-Kindle Unlimited books for the keyword billionaire romance that have been published month by month here, starting in the year 2013. Now you see, first of all, book supply is tracked here, the strong increase in the demand, in the interest for billionaire romance. Then it sort of, died down a little bit. And then here over the last years, the number of books published month by month kept increasing from one month to the other. So this is where you could argue now, after years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, may have reached a bit of a saturation point when it comes to billionaire romance. Now, identifying trends, here are some tips. As you've seen, Google Trends is your friends. It's very good, but you need to understand the search syntax of how to use it. Google News Alerts is an interesting tool. Have you put in Google News Alerts for your genre or author names? Can be very useful. Many of you will be part of Facebook groups, but have you ever used the search bar in a Facebook group and put in things like trend or latest or what's the next? And you get some interesting discussions on these. Movie databases, especially those that show the lineup of movies and TV series that are yet to be released, can be pointing at future trends. Watching pre-orders. I'm going to show how to do that in just a second. And of course, you can use us, K-lytics. We can do some of the work for you. All right, watching pre-orders, that's a neat trick you should know. If you go into the Kindle store, on the top the top menu bar on the very right hand side, if you go on it on a desktop, you find something called Advanced Search. If you click on it, you get to this type of advanced search window, where you can search for books by keywords, author names, titles, you name it. These are the additional filters here on the left hand side, but what I'm driving into, you can use categories, main categories, and here the publication date, and that is the trick. You enter the publication date after the current month. So let me demonstrate live here, all languages after the month here, in this case October 2020. And let's use the example we just had. In the title there should be paranormal women's fiction, and if you then click search, you get all the lineup, all the pre-orders, and there are 36 further books here already in the lineup for this new segment. And you can use this tool also here with additional filters, publisher names or titles or combinations. You could do English titles in the category romance with a keyword billionaire after today's publication date, and you get, wow, here close to 600 titles that are in the making. All right, so much for spotting trends, but there are other trends, or I'd call them market forces, that are happening in the Amazon ecosystem that we've been monitoring over the past couple of years, and you should be aware of those. Now, doing market updates in presentations is a bit of a challenge because there are certain words that you don't want to hear anymore. It's a bit like Lord Voldemort in Harry Potter being referred to as he who must not be named. So please bear with me if I use any of the words like virus or lockdown or corona. I will use them because to say that which must not be named would be a bit cumbersome. Anyway, let's go into this market update and then talk about market forces. Now, print books have been seen a great rebound, and ebooks have been the big beneficiary of the coronavirus crisis. This is, of course, an overlay of different scales, but you see how the coronavirus crisis has driven ebook demand quite considerably. As a result, there have been both winners and losers in the book market. And these are just drastic examples to illustrate the point. On the left-hand side, books and the book category about infectious diseases going through the roof. On the right-hand side, any travel books about Europe, Italy, Florence, the category really going down into nowhere. But overall, you should be aware that ebooks have seen a major increase in demand. And one indicator is the spike here that you see in these yellow bars, which denote the Kindle Select Global Fund. That is the royalties being paid to Kindle Unlimited Kindle Select authors who've chosen to go exclusive with Amazon, where in 2020, one highest ever month has been chasing the other. And if we take all the months year to date in September and make a projection for 2020, we're going to see a 25% increase in these aggregate payouts, and that is basically a doubling of the growth rate that we've seen last year. And guess what? It's not only Amazon, by the way. Even traditional publishers reported big ebook growth numbers. For example, here recently, the Association of American Publishers reported 25% growth in July 2020 versus July 2019. And the first 7 months are up 14% versus prior year. And that is after years of always reporting and pushing out a narrative that ebooks have been going down. And what's really great news for many amongst you is the really big indie power in that whole Amazon ebook movement. Now, look here, the share of Kindle store-wide top 100 rankings achieved by publisher type in the year 2019 and 2020, 35% of the top 100 rankings across all categories. And we monitored, by the way, the last 5 years. Here is the last 2 years, and 35% of these rankings have been achieved by indies, then 32% in 2020 by Amazon imprints. Only then come the big five, and then other types of publishers. It's probably never been a better time to be or become a self-publisher. And if we look at various Amazon main categories, have a look here. The dark orange number is indie published, indie achieved top 100 rankings in the category romance. 70% of the rankings achieved by indies. Take here sci-fi and fantasy, 71%, teen young adult, 67%. I think that's just an amazing achievement. All right, now there are a couple of multi-year trends, market forces, and I want to explore those in a bit more detail now because they are relevant for your publishing projects. First of all, market forces here in the industry are a bit like black holes, like the picture I've just shown, where things that are big tend to get bigger. Mass amasses more mass, like a black hole that's sucking in all the stars around it. So one phenomenon we've seen is the number of books that are Kindle format across the 30 main categories. Back in 2017, the red area is Kindle books, orange print, blue is audio, and you compare it with April 2020, you see how print, it's really continued to get squeezed between Kindle and the audio format. Now this graph shows all the category. If I restrict the view just to the main fiction genres, romance, literature, fiction, mystery, thriller, suspense, sci-fi, and fantasy, and teen young adult, well, I think this graph drives the story home. More than 80% of the fiction top 100 bestseller lists are basically dominated, represented by the Kindle edition. Market force number 2, the Kindle Unlimited factor, which continues to gain share. So Kindle Unlimited, all the books that are basically paid by the number of pages read under the Kindle Unlimited subscription scheme or Amazon Prime. The share of Kindle Unlimited titles in the top 100 rankings across 30 main categories on Amazon was 44% back in 2016. In the year 2020, it has grown to 56%. And if we were to put a weighting onto these numbers by sales rank, where, good sales rank representing a higher volume, then we would see 65% today already being Kindle Unlimited. And especially in the big fiction genres like romance, sci-fi and fantasy, teen young adult, the Kindle Unlimited share is just immensely high. If you ask why is that the case? Well, probably has to do with the Amazon algorithm, but not that it is manipulating anything. It's a bit like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because, if you look at the buy button of a typical, straight purchase book, well, you have it here on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, it competes with a Kindle download button, which psychologically is basically read it for free. Of course, you pay the subscription, but once you have the subscription, you can just download it. Now, both purchases and downloads drive sales rank. The right-hand button is going to convert much, much better than a paid button. And that's why over time, we believe, Kindle Unlimited share increase is just baked into that fact that both downloads and purchases drive sales rank. And this is this phenomenon and problem with the artificial intelligence or algorithms. They are dumb, they're just mathematical formulas, where sometimes in the algorithm popular things will reinforce themselves. A bit like Facebook, when you like certain pages, you're going to be shown more of the same. All right, then trend number 2, series expand slowly but gradually. Back in 2016, about 21% of the top 100 rankings were books that formed part of a series. By now it's 25%, and so here we also see a slow but gradual increase, where also some of the genres are really dominated by series. That is why it is beneficial to plan your book projects as a series. Also, the return on your advertising, given the read-throughs, tends to be better. So that's a factor to think with. Then factor number 4, I call it the gravity of cover cliches. Again, it's a bit like a self-reinforcing system. Certain types of covers do well, they rank well. Others copy them, put advertising money into the same type of covers, and then they do well again and self-reinforce themselves, whether it's sci-fi, romance, paranormal, women's fiction, wholesome romance, Scottish romance, you name it. All of them have very typical covers and they get more popular. And one case example, take vigilante justice fiction, which we made a study on. Here we have really a proof of cliche success seems to be self-reinforcing, because by now 3 types of covers, cliche covers, basically command 90% of the book market in vigilante justice fiction. So the overall picture in the market is significant growth, where on the question, does the book market need a vaccine, you can really conclude, hell no. All right, let's continue with the 3rd chapter of our journey in this presentation, the challenge. Every opportunity comes with a challenge, and you will know the one challenge that every author and publisher is facing in this ebook market. And that is the immense supply of books. It has been a crowded place. In the mid of 2020, about 6.8 million English books were on the Kindle store. About 88,000 new titles have been added every month. And that in the mid-year was already a growth of 18% versus the last year. The whole coronavirus crisis and the lockdowns have even aggravated the situation from a competition point of view, because there was no lockdown blues. The authors really got busy. So the average growth rate, which was through to the mid-year, was around 88,000. Increased here. You see month by month the number of new Kindle titles coming on board. We've reached a new peak in August 2020 of 123,000 titles. As of the time of this recording, we already exceeded the 7 million mark in English-speaking titles. Of course, many of these are dead titles, non-promoted titles, because Amazon is a bit like the Library of Congress. They don't purge the book's shelves. And what I'd like to do now is show you some Amazon data essentials that are important to know if you want to find the best categories where to put your book in, the best categories and subgenres for your writing projects, because you will see that type of data will help you improve the odds of success. I stress improving the odds of success because, as we all know, in the book market there is no guarantee for success. One has to get a lot of ducks in the row to create a bestseller, and a bit of luck on top of it, if not a whole lot of luck on top of it. But it is a bit like in a poker tournament where, those players who do know the numbers tend to be the better players in the long run. If you're a beginner, you may want to watch the next 5 minutes just to get some basics. Where to look for useful data on Amazon? Well, there are many places, but the main 4 parts are search. Whatever keyword or search phrase you put in will show you, what are the titles that come up. The popularity lists, the browse categories also on the left hand side will show you books by popularity by the Amazon suggest algorithm. Bestseller lists are a bit of a different breed because there the books shown will only show the top 100 and they are sorted by sales rank, which is purely by sales and downloads, and of course the basics of the information you get on the book product pages. Starting with the letter, we work here with 2 factors. On any book page, if you scroll down on the book detail page, you will get a whole bunch of numbers. Now, this is a picture of how it used to look like, but the basics are still the same. You find the Amazon bestseller rank. That is the important number because it indicates relative level of sales. Relative to what? Relative to all other books in the store. So you can be the number 1 in the store, or you can be number 7 million. And then below it are the so-called category bestseller ranks. Now, they only indicate what are the hot books within a given book category or subcategory. And here, by the way, you see the old picture where still the whole category path was given. That is no longer displayed on the book detail pages, but we still track the whole path. You have to be a bit aware of those category bestseller ranks and when people use them, because you can see bestsellers that do not sell. Because if you are the number 1 in a category, you can still be like, number 345,000 in the Amazon Kindle store, especially in low selling nonfiction categories. You see these types of examples where people boast they are number 1 bestsellers, but in fact they're only a number 1 bestseller in a category. Now, Amazon's bestseller rank, plain and simple, as mentioned before, purchases and download drive the bestseller rank, and they're a bit like, every purchase and download gives you a score. So say on day 1 there are 100 downloads, on day 3 there are 150. Both these download days are a bit like votes, and the votes have a certain characteristic, almost like in real politics. They decay in value over time. They devalue over time. So in fact, if you sell 100 books on day 1, the score for those books in the algorithm will only be half of it the next day, then half again on day 3. So on day 3, what would be the total score, if you will, for those books, the total number of votes? It would be the 150 votes that are happening on day 3, plus the residual value of those initial 100 sales of day 1, which are now worth 25 on day 3, in total 175. If a book has more votes or points scored, then it will rank higher, in this case the title number 1. If it has less, it will score lower, here title 3. So this book here is the second in the rank. And the fact that purchases or downloads are like votes that count towards a ranking but decay over time also explains that zigzag shape in your sales rank stats that you see over time. Here we tracked it, by the way, on an hourly basis, and it really shows, one sale or one download drives up the sales rank quite a bit, especially if it's a low ranking book, such as in this case. And you see then it goes all the way up here to rank 25,000 where the arrow is, and then hour by hour it starts decaying again over days. The whole period is here a period of 30 days. Why am I showing you this graph? Well, you see the fluctuation is quite significant, and that is why you have to watch out when you go onto a bestseller list and you see what's trending high. You can see that already like 2-3 days later, the book is back in oblivion. So if something seems to be trending right now, you cannot have a look at this just with a moment in time. You have to look at it over a period of time. And that is exactly what we do when we monitor all the book categories over a period of time. And if you can monitor the data and look at the data from one book, you can do that for a whole group of books, and over time you can thus monitor the performance of, for example, a category, a certain specified search result, or any custom grouping, any tailored grouping of books that you'd like to monitor. For the purpose of today's presentation, I want to focus on categories. Why do categories matter? First of all, Amazon pushes a category-based shopping experience. It's like any retail supermarket where you come in and the whole merchandise is categorized into aisles. Very much so in the Amazon bookstore. And if you go into Walmart and you're a manufacturer of noodles, but the noodles are put into the washing powder aisles, then people who look for noodles will not find your brand. And it's a bit the same with your book. Your book needs to be in the right book categories, and the data of your book needs to also match with certain keywords. Both these factors have to work hand in hand so that your book is found. And what is more, especially if you are in broad categories, and here is an example, a search word paranormal romance, the search results that Amazon will display are often confined to the matching categories. Then if you really want to get geeky, categories are also pushed into the keywords metadata that are in the source code of the very Amazon book page. That means the HTML, the underlying code that displays the page. And that is how a Google bot would see the page. And you see here the metadata keywords. If you then look here, my friend Chris Fox's book here, Right to Market. Now the keywords that are pushed into that metadata by Amazon is here, business and economics, business, reference, writing skills. So it is category information, which is interesting because the keywords you put into the upload of your Kindle book on the Amazon KDP dashboard, they only seem to be there for internal search engine reasons, which are super important, but not for the external display of the page. Okay, this is as geeky as it can get here in this presentation. Back to more simple things. Category choices also drive bestseller badges in the search results. Some categories are easier to rank in than others. And psychologically, if your book comes with such a bestseller badge, from a buyer psychology point of view, people are more inclined to click on such search results. And see, category choice can be very helpful. Even the big players are doing it. As if Mrs. Rowling had to do this. I don't think so. But you see, if you put in Harry Potter into the search bar, it will always come up with an orange bestseller badge. But sometimes that bestseller badge is not being earned in one of the big categories, but it is here in children's ebooks, growing up, and facts of life, family life, orphans, and foster homes. Very obscure small category, which is very easy to rank in. Well, Harry Potter is an orphan, so that fits. Another reason why I really like also to use category data as a first quick approximation of the book market. And yes, there are factors such as category pollution, but as a first approximation, it's always a good thing to look at because it gives you essential, vital data on the book market, on certain trends if you monitor them over time. And that's what we're going to have a look at now. So how do you go about finding the markets and categories that are right for you? Now, I stress right for you and right for your book, because what works for one author or one book may not necessarily be the right choice for another book. And we can go about this in a number of pretty simple steps. Step number one is you have to be clear about your goals. And on top of it, those goals may come with different levels of decision makings. Is it about strategy, which is more a question what to write in the first place, or is it about tactics, that is to say how to market your book, so in what books to upload your book? See, if you write about a certain topic, a certain genre, only for the passion of it, you may not care about, really what category it is or what category you write in. If you're passionate about volcano photography, you want to write about volcano photography. Now, if it's more about the money, you may want to focus on certain markets, certain subgenres that come with a very high demand, but ideally with a fairly low level of competition. Or if you're in non-fiction, you may write for the authority. So you want to have that #1 bestseller in maritime law because you want to be the authority in maritime law. But for most authors who are concerned about it will be about those categories that show high sales. You have to know the markets that provide high sales. Because from experience in monitoring data over 6 years, I can tell you there are a lot of markets where if you don't know where to drill, you may hit a dry well. In fact, there are many dry wells on the Kindle market. So if we just have a closer look here at our K-lytics Elite data summary, which we do every month, see here the worst selling categories are some non-fiction categories where across the top 20 titles, the average sales rank is only 3 million. Now that's where you don't want to be. By contrast, you have to face the fact that the highest selling Kindle categories will be romance, it will be mystery, thriller, suspense. Sometimes non-fiction or science fiction and fantasy will come next in rank, then children's ebooks. This is more a phenomenon here of the lockdown period, then teen young adult, and then it becomes pretty niche pretty quickly. And that picture is just reinforced if you break it down the next level of details. Here are the highest selling subcategories by the volume of the top 20 titles monitored over time. So things like women's fiction, contemporary fiction, these are very broad categories: contemporary romance, thrillers, suspense, mystery, you name it. But then, it already becomes more specific: romantic suspense, crime fiction, biographies and memoirs, and of course you can then get into more and more detail, and of course many of you will want to really identify certain niche markets. By the way, how do certain genres fare on the audio sales market, audio market? We've discussed earlier the immense growth not only in ebook but also in the audiobooks. And audio tends to behave a little bit different. You need to be aware of that. So the highest selling audio categories would be, if we neglect literature and fiction as the broad umbrella categories for a second, sci-fi and fantasy, #1. Then non-fiction, of course, very strong in the audio channel. Then mystery, thriller, suspense, then business and careers, biographies and memoirs, politics, social sciences, health and wellness. And here, romance, which is clearly the #1 genre on the ebook side, is only here more middle of the pack on the audio side. All right, now that is sales, and you will want to go for high sales, but don't forget the second big factor, and this is your step 3, look for those high selling markets where ideally you also face a low level of competition. See, there are so many opportunities in the book market. In fact, opportunities abound, and if every star on this sky was a book genre or a trope, the possibilities are almost endless. But what you'd like to have is almost like a map to the stars and say, well, which star do I want to aspire to, or do I want to travel to? If you had a map to the stars, you could argue, well, in this case, the higher the star is above the horizon, the higher the market potential, the bigger the pot of gold. And the further the star is to the right of the horizon, the higher is the level of competition. This is how you could construct a map. And you would then say, well, the yellow star is really brighter, or the better star, because it offers a higher level of opportunity that comes at a lower level of competition compared to the red star. And it is that map that we've already created 6 years ago, and that we've been updating month over month, and where we monitor all the 7,000 plus categories on the Kindle store and plot it on such map. And it works exactly the same way as I've just explained. So let's illustrate and explore the spectrum. You'd have very big high-selling categories such as mystery, thriller, suspense, thrillers on the top right-hand side, where the average sales rank across the top 20 titles is 44 out of 7 million. But you see there are 124,000 titles you'd compete with. You could go more niche, for example, by age group, teen, young, adult, focus on romance, and within that, on clean and wholesome romance. So really a niche of a niche, where the average sales rank, well, is not as high, but it is still high, around 9,800 in the Kindle store, but it comes with only 450 titles at the point of this recording, English speaking titles that is. Or you could say, I want to be the #1 bestseller in biographies and memoirs about country and folk musicians. Well, you see what's happening there. You'd compete with only 20 to 30 other titles, but the sales rank is pretty low. This gives you the breadth of the spectrum, and you could then confine it to certain genres. For example, romance. This is like the whole health status of the romance genre. Still many opportunities of, say, smaller and medium-sized categories that come with pretty high sales in relation to the level of competition involved. If you go for paranormal romance, though, just in general, without defining a certain market niche, you are in what we call a hot mainstream market. It is very high selling, but we're approaching about 100,000 titles in the very category. And what I then also suggest in using our data is that we combine this, say, static and view of a certain month and look at it, how do things perform over time. And there you start exploring and finding interesting patterns, especially if you look again over a longer term horizon. This, for example, is teen, young, adult dystopian romance monitored over 5 years. And you see after the whole Hunger Games type and Divergent, you name it, trend, well, it's been a downward trend over like 4 or 5 years. And then all of a sudden here towards start of 2020, we get this turnaround in the trend. And now it's not driven just by Suzanne Collins' new book. In fact, if you look at the people involved, we see authors of the like of Kira Cass, Jeanette Penner, Heidi Catherine, Cordelia K. Castle, Veronica Roth, and so on and so forth. Another interesting discussion around paranormal romance, ranking high but trending down. We hoped at the start of the year that we see here this slight upward trend continue, so a rejuvenation of paranormal romance. Unfortunately here, especially during 2020, the lockdown period didn't help genre, unfortunately. Monitoring the categories over a longer period of time also allows here to contrast certain genres. For example, clean and wholesome romance was one of the most resilient during the lockdown. Here on this exhibit, we also show the distinction between clean and wholesome romance versus erotica. Now, erotica is heavily restricted in the advertising on Amazon, so this is probably one of the drivers. But also here, interesting to see that the downward trend is leveling off at the sales rank of around 2,000 right now. We could probably go on for hours. This is the overall picture for mystery, thriller, suspense. A couple of very strong markets. For example, mystery, thriller, suspense, domestic thrillers, pretty small in size, but very high selling. A number of other niches like vigilantes just as very strong. Cozy mystery becoming more a mainstream market, but also within there, as mentioned earlier, things like witch cozy mystery, paranormal cozy mystery still going very strong. Psychological thrillers have seen a 5-year rise. And closing here with science fiction, we just want to conclude the overall objective is to find market niches that are high in sales and come at the lowest possible level of competition. All right, that brings us to step number 4, especially when it comes to more, say, tactical category selection. When you upload your book, you may want to look for categories that are easy to rank in. And these are categories where you can rank as the #1 bestseller easily. But the one thing you really don't want to do, and I stress you don't want to do, please don't use this to game the system, because readers are not stupid. They will punish you. Also, the Amazon algorithm will see that when they recommend you to potential readers of crafts and hobbies and home books, that this romance book here being #1 bestseller in woodworking projects, I think it's just ridiculous, and it will be punished in the long run. But still, there are categories that are very small in size. And in fact, there are categories where Amazon will tell you, sorry, there are no bestsellers available in this category. Please check back later. Now, you may be aware of the fact, or should be aware of the fact, that you can have, and by now almost any author on Amazon knows, you can have more than the 2 categories that you see in the upload dashboard of your upload of your KDP book, and that allows you to go for broader exposure and use categories as a marketing mechanism to put your book into a whole number of aisles in the supermarket. For example, here, Bella Forest, especially if you have an Amazon rep, if you're a big hitting author, you can even get into more than 10 categories. And here, Bella Forest's book was listed in like 17 categories last year. The issue is obviously that the KDP dashboard does not help a lot, because these categories will not be the ones you find in the Amazon storefront, and as they are also confined to 2 for selection. The problem is that on the left hand side, the KDP upload dashboard is based on a industry classification, the so-called BISAC codes, and Amazon had a bit of an outdated fix to make the bridge between the left hand side and the right hand side, the Amazon storefront, which is based on Amazon's own product and genre hierarchy tree. And they used to have this fix where they made you use 2 of the categories on the left hand side, and then a user or app use certain keywords of the 7 keywords you can put into the upload dashboard to then force the book into certain storefront categories. Thank God that is no longer required. You can have more categories, and you can simply get your book into those if you tell Amazon the exact category path where you want to have your book in. You can contact Amazon either through, on the left hand side here, Author Central, or on the right hand side, the KDP support. KDP support on the right hand side will already have pre-configured emails that you can send to them. On the left hand side, some authors prefer Author Central because they argue the customer service is better on the left hand side. But in the end of the day, both paths will lead you hopefully to the desired outcome. Step number 6, and people also tend to forget this, sometimes there are like really fitting categories where the topical fit between your book and the category path offered by Amazon is just perfect. Now, to illustrate, if you had books about growing bonsai trees or Japanese gardening, well, there is amongst 46 gardening and horticulture categories there are 46 of those, but there's only 1 for Japanese garden. So you want to be in the Japanese gardening category. And the last point is, I suggest to people to balance all these factors and mix and match. And here, if you'd like to take a screenshot, here is the summary of this 7-step approach to finding the categories that are right for you and your book. Last but not least, this brings us to the last chapter. You can, of course, use data also looking beyond categories. And there are in fact many market genres, market niches where Amazon doesn't even provide a dedicated category. Take things like bad boy romance, female protagonist thrillers, literature, role-playing game literature or game literature, superhero fiction. Now, superhero fiction, there is actually a category, but you find these books also in so many other categories that for this reason, we use text mining techniques where we look at the occurrence of certain terms in the book titles and book descriptions. So we create basically our own bestseller lists, which then allows us to provide you with market research information about very specific genres and market niches. And once we then confine the data, to a certain market, such as take romantic comedy as an example, we can then explore, for example, what cover types sell within romantic comedy. Is it the flat vector graphic? Is it the sexy guy, the girl, the romantic couple, the sexy couple, or Mr. Handsome on the cover? The data can then tell. Okay, in conclusion, so what to do with all of this? As said, spotting trends, categories, and market niches is all about what to write, or the more tactical question about how to market your book. Some people do use the term write to market, or publish to market, or market to market. Whatever it is, you should do so without bending yourself. So please do write what you love to write, where you have a passion, where you bring the certain craft for the genre involved, and where you have the required knowledge. So don't write legal thrillers if you don't know the legal proceedings to write in an authentic manner. What we bring into the game is the market and marketing information, and I think where all these factors come together, that's a bit the magic zone where creativity and success can happen. If you liked all this, I invite you to have a look at our website. It's K-lytics.com, K-lytics.com. We provide market data in forms of a database. You can look at individual genre reports. If you're interested, by the way, in one of what is contained in such genre market niche seminars, check out k-lytics.com/Christmas. This is an example from the romance genre seasonal publishing mastery. But in this report, you will also see what is contained in, say, any other niche market that we cover. And if you have any questions about this presentation or about what we're offering, please don't hesitate to write to me at support@k-lytics.com. Just put "attention Alex" in the subject line. It was a great pleasure presenting all this to you. I thank you for your attention. This is Alex Newton from K-lytics, ebook market intelligence for success. Bye for now.